William Peterson awoke with a strangled gasp, clawing at his calf where the itching had transformed into white-hot pain. The bathroom mirror revealed what he'd been dreading. Something was moving beneath his skin. It wasn't bedbugs. Whatever lurked under his flesh was alive, pulsing, writhing. His neighbor Eleanor dropped the casserole dish she'd brought, shattering ceramic across his kitchen floor as she glimpsed the grotesque rippling beneath his rolled-up pant leg. "Sweet Jesus, Bill," she whispered, backing away. The wedding photo on the wall, Martha's smile, frozen in time, seemed to dim as he stood trembling in this empty house where he'd nursed his wife through cancer, where he now faced this horror alone. 7 years a widower, and now this. "I need to get you to a hospital right now," Eleanor commanded, though her voice quavered. What was happening to his body, and how would he afford to fix it on a retired teacher's pittance? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Palm Haven had once seemed like paradise to Bill Peterson. 17 years ago, he and Martha had driven down from Michigan in their packed Buick, giddy as teenagers about their retirement community with its modest homes and swaying palm trees. Now, at 72, the Florida sunshine felt like a mockery of his solitude. Bill shuffled through his living room, carefully avoiding the cardboard boxes that still contained Martha's clothes. 7 years since cancer took her, and he couldn't bring himself to donate them. The house had become a museum of their life together. Her gardening magazines still stacked on the coffee table, her reading glasses perched on top as if she might return any moment to finish an article about growing hydrangeas in Florida's unforgiving soil. "You need to let go, Dad," Michael had said after the funeral. His only son, a college professor up north, had wanted Bill to sell the house, move to a retirement facility closer to him. Their argument had escalated, harsh words about Martha's final months, about experimental treatments Bill had insisted on trying despite her wishes for comfort care. Michael had left Florida the next day. Their phone calls grew shorter, less frequent, until they stopped altogether 3 years ago. Bill's routine had narrowed to the essentials. Breakfast at the kitchen table, looking out at Martha's withering garden. Afternoon walks to the community mailbox, nodding politely to neighbors whose names he sometimes forgot. Dinners in front of the television, volume too loud because he refused to admit he needed hearing aids. His pension covered the basics, but healthcare costs ate away at his savings, leaving little for home repairs or unexpected emergencies. The bathroom mirror told the story his doctor wouldn't say outright during his annual physical. He was fading, skin hanging loosely on his once robust frame, white hair thinning, eyes that had lost their alert sparkle. But it was the newer changes that troubled him most, the strange red marks that had appeared on his legs and torso 3 weeks ago. They itched ferociously, keeping him awake at night. Probably just Florida bugs, he told himself initially, spraying insecticide around his bed frame. He'd washed his sheets in hot water, vacuumed every corner of his bedroom, even replaced his ancient mattress with one he could barely afford. Nothing helped. The marks multiplied, growing angrier and more painful. Bill's hands trembled as he applied over-the-counter hydrocortisone cream to the worst spots. His Medicare Part D prescription coverage had a gap that left him paying full price for medications this month. A doctor's visit would mean the specialist copay he couldn't afford, and he'd already been forced to choose between filling his heart medication and paying the electric bill last summer. "You're being stubborn again," he could almost hear Martha saying. She'd always handled the medical decisions, insisted on regular checkups. Without her, it was easy to postpone, to ignore, to pretend everything was fine. As he looked at the strange welts on his skin, Bill Peterson knew everything was not fine, but admitting that meant admitting he needed help. And that was something he wasn't ready to do. Not yet. The first bite appeared innocently enough, a small red dot on Bill's ankle that he noticed while putting on his socks. Florida was home to mosquitoes, fire ants, and no seums. An occasional bite was part of the bargain for winter sunshine. But when 3 more appeared by evening, clustered in a line up his calf, Bill frowned. The way they itched was different, deeper, more persistent, almost burning. "Darn bugs," he muttered, scratching absently while watching the evening news. The weatherman predicted another beautiful week in paradise, as if reading from a script written by the tourism board. By morning, the itching had intensified, and the bites looked angrier, raised with small white centers. Bill shuffled to the bathroom and rummaged through the medicine cabinet, finding an ancient tube of anti-itch cream behind Martha's prescription bottles he couldn't bring himself to discard. The expiration date had long passed, but he squeezed a small amount onto his finger anyway and dabbed it on the bites. 3 days later, the cream hadn't helped. New marks appeared on his other leg, then his lower back, and finally his arms. The pattern was unmistakable. Small clusters of bites, intensely itchy, worse at night. Bill's online research all pointed to one culprit: bedbugs. "Bedbugs," he said aloud to his empty kitchen, the word itself making him feel unclean. Martha had been fastidious about their home. What would she think now? The thought of tiny insects feeding on him while he slept made his skin crawl, even more than it already was from the constant itching. That afternoon, Bill stripped his bed completely. He dragged the sheets, pillowcases, and blankets to the laundromat 2 blocks away, feeding quarters into the industrial-sized washing machine and selecting the hottest water setting. While the machines churned, he sat on a plastic chair, trying not to scratch in public. A young mother gave him a wary glance and moved her laundry basket to a different table. Back home, Bill inspected his mattress meticulously, using a flashlight to examine every seam and crevice. He found nothing. No insects, no telltale black specks, no shed skins that the websites described. Still, he sprayed the entire bed frame with a can of insecticide from the hardware store, the chemical smell making him cough. That night, despite clean sheets and a sprayed bed, Bill woke at 2:17 a.m. scratching furiously at new bites on his forearm. "This is ridiculous," he grumbled, flipping on the bedside lamp. The sudden light illuminated his bedroom. Martha's dressing table still arranged with her perfume bottles, their wedding photo watching over him from the wall. He felt a stab of loneliness sharper than the itching. The next morning, Bill drove to Walmart and spent $63.42, nearly half his weekly grocery budget, on bedbug-specific sprays, mattress covers, and traps. The cashier, a teenager with purple hair, raised her eyebrows at his purchases. "Got a problem at home, huh?" she asked, popping her gum. "Just being cautious," Bill replied stiffly, embarrassed by the assumption of uncleanliness. For 3 days, Bill waged chemical warfare against an enemy he couldn't see. He sprayed every crack and crevice, set traps around his bed legs, and encased his mattress in a plastic cover that crinkled loudly whenever he moved. The house reeked of pesticides, giving him headaches, but the bites continued to appear. Worse, they were changing, growing larger, redder, with small central blisters that sometimes broke and wept clear fluid. Bill's sleep deteriorated further. Between the discomfort of the plastic mattress cover, the constant itching, and anxiety about what was happening, he managed only brief stretches of restless dozing. Dark circles formed under his eyes, and he began to drop things, his coffee mug, his keys, the newspaper, as fatigue affected his coordination. After a week of failed self-treatment, Bill sat at his kitchen table with Martha's old medical journal open before him. She had meticulously documented every appointment, medication, and symptom during her illness. Her handwriting, once elegant, had grown shakier toward the end, but she'd maintained the journal until 3 days before she died. Bill traced his finger over the final entry. "Told Bill to take care of himself when I'm gone." He promised. He hadn't kept that promise. His own annual checkups had become biennial, then stopped altogether after the copays increased. His blood pressure medication sometimes went unfilled when the budget was tight. Martha would be disappointed. With a sigh, Bill reached for his phone and paused. Who should he call? His healthcare plan required referrals, and his primary physician had retired last year. He had never bothered to find a replacement. The urgent care clinic charged $95 just to walk through the door. Finally, pragmatism won out over pride. He would start with the simplest explanation: bedbugs. The yellow pages, Bill still kept a paper copy, listed several exterminators. He called the one with the cheapest-looking advertisement Williams Pest Control, fair prices, fast service. A gruff voice answered on the third ring. Bill explained his situation, trying to keep the desperation from his voice. "Bedbugs can be tricky," Ted Williams said. "Could be other things too. Fleas, mites, even some allergic reactions look like bites. Best if I come take a look." They arranged for Ted to visit the following morning. Bill spent the evening cleaning, suddenly aware of how far the house had fallen into disrepair. Dust coated the bookshelves, mail was piled haphazardly on the counter, and the kitchen sink contained 3 days' worth of dishes. Martha would be mortified. He washed the dishes and swept the floors, but exhaustion overtook him before he could tackle the bathroom or the piles of newspapers by his recliner. That night, determined to identify his tormentors, Bill set up his old digital camera on the dresser, aiming it at the bed. He set it to record video, hoping to catch the bedbugs in action. Then he turned off the lights and lay down, trying not to scratch, trying not to think about insects crawling over his skin in the darkness. Morning came after another restless night. Bill's hands shook as he retrieved the camera and reviewed the footage. For most of the recording, there was only darkness and occasional movement as he shifted position. Then, around 3:40 a.m., he saw something that made his blood run cold. The blanket over his leg moved slightly, as if something underneath was shifting. But it wasn't the blanket being disturbed from above, as bedbugs would cause. It was moving from below, from inside. Bill nearly dropped the camera. What had he just seen? He rewound and watched again, his heart pounding. The movement was subtle but unmistakable, something beneath the surface, pushing upward. Bill instinctively touched his leg where new bites had formed overnight. The skin felt warm, tight, almost pulsing. The doorbell rang, startling him so badly that he did drop the camera this time. Ted Williams had arrived for the inspection. Bill hurriedly pulled on long pants to cover the worst of the bites and went to answer the door. Ted was a stocky man in his 50s with a weathered face and practical clothes, khaki pants and a polo shirt with his company logo. He carried a toolbox-sized kit and had the confident bearing of someone who had seen it all. "Morning, Mr. Peterson. Ready to find these bedbugs?" Bill led him inside, suddenly self-conscious about the state of his home despite yesterday's partial cleaning. Ted didn't seem to notice or care about the clutter. He got straight to business, beginning a methodical inspection of the bedroom. "Bedbugs like to hide close to where they feed," Ted explained, examining the mattress seams with a powerful flashlight. "They're about the size of an apple seed, brownish, and they leave behind black specks. That's their waste, and sometimes tiny blood spots." Bill watched anxiously as Ted inspected the entire bed frame, the baseboards, the nightstand, and even the picture frames. After nearly an hour, Ted stood up and scratched his head. "Mr. Peterson, I'm not finding any evidence of bedbugs here. No live bugs, no skins, no fecal matter, nothing." "But the bites," Bill protested weakly. "What else could it be?" Ted's expression shifted from professional to concerned. "Mind if I take a look at these bites? I've seen a lot of insect damage in my time." Reluctantly, Bill rolled up his pant leg. Ted crouched down, examining the angry red welts with a furrowed brow. How long have you had these? About 2 weeks now. They started on my ankles, but they're spreading. Ted straightened up, his face serious. Mr. Peterson, I don't think these are bedbug bites. Bedbug bites typically form a line or cluster, but they don't have these raised centers or this kind of inflammation, and some of these look like— He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Like something's happening beneath the skin. Bill's mind flashed to the video footage, the movement under the blanket. What do you mean? He asked, his mouth suddenly dry. I'm not a doctor, Ted said quickly, but I've been doing this job for 27 years and I've seen all kinds of insect bites. These look more like some kind of parasitic infection to me. Have you traveled recently? Outside the country, maybe? Bill shook his head. Haven't left Florida in years. Not since my wife. He trailed off. Ted nodded sympathetically. I'd recommend seeing a doctor, sir. Soon. These don't look like something over-the-counter creams will fix. After Ted left, refusing to charge for the inspection since he hadn't found any pests, Bill sat heavily in his recliner. The word parasitic echoed in his mind, conjuring images too disturbing to dwell on. The responsible thing would be to see a doctor immediately. But responsibility required resources, money, transportation, the energy to navigate the healthcare maze. Bill picked up the phone and stared at it. Martha would want him to call for help. Michael might know what to do. He was educated, connected, had good insurance through his university. But pride kept Bill's finger from dialing his son's number. How could he call after 3 years of silence, just to ask for help with a medical problem? The phone slipped from his hand as a wave of exhaustion washed over him. Just a short rest, he told himself, closing his eyes. Just 5 minutes, and then he would figure out what to do next. Bill woke with a start, disoriented in the fading afternoon light. His recliner had left a crick in his neck, and the itching was worse. He glanced at the clock, 4:37 p.m. He'd slept for nearly 3 hours. The exterminator's words echoed in his mind. Parasitic infection. The very phrase made his skin crawl. Or was that just his imagination? A knock at the door jolted him fully awake. Through the peephole he saw Eleanor Johnson, his neighbor from 2 doors down. Eleanor had moved to Palm Haven the same year as Bill and Martha. After Martha's diagnosis, Eleanor had organized the neighborhood meal train, ensuring they had home-cooked food during the worst days of chemotherapy. Bill, I know you're in there. I saw your car, Eleanor called through the door. With a sigh, Bill opened it. Eleanor stood on his doorstep holding a casserole dish, her gray hair neatly styled, a concerned frown creasing her face. You missed the community breakfast again, she said, pushing past him into the house. 3rd time this month. People are starting to talk. I've been under the weather, Bill mumbled, following her to the kitchen. Eleanor set the casserole on the counter and turned to face him, really looking at him for the first time. Her expression shifted from mild annoyance to alarm. Bill Peterson, you look terrible. What's going on? Before he could formulate a dismissive response, Bill felt a sharp pain shoot through his calf so intense it made him grab the counter for support. Eleanor was at his side immediately. That's it, she declared. I'm taking you to the urgent care clinic right now. It's nothing, Bill protested weakly. Just some bug bites. Bug bites don't make a man look like he's about to pass out, Eleanor countered. My Harold had skin cancer that started just like that. Strange marks he ignored until it was almost too late. I'm not watching another stubborn old fool risk his life over pride. The mention of cancer, the disease that had taken Martha despite all the treatments, all the prayers, weakened Bill's resolve. What if this was something serious? What if, by ignoring it, he was making the same mistake that had cost precious time in Martha's case? My Medicare supplement has a high deductible, he said quietly, hating the admission of financial vulnerability. Eleanor's expression softened. We'll figure that out later. Right now you need a doctor." 20 minutes later, Bill found himself in Eleanor's immaculate Buick, heading toward the Bayshore Urgent Care Center. As they drove, he stared out the window at the passing landscape. Strip malls, palm trees, retirement communities with names like Sunset Palms and Golden Shores. This had been their dream, his and Martha's, to live out their golden years in the Sunshine State. Now, the sunshine felt harsh, exposing his failures. "When was the last time you spoke to Michael?" Eleanor asked, breaking into his thoughts. Bill tensed. "Been a while." "That boy should be checking on you," she said with the righteous indignation of someone who called her own children every Sunday without fail. "We had a disagreement," Bill said, the words inadequate to describe the chasm that had opened between father and son. "About his mother's care, at the end." Eleanor glanced at him, then back at the road. "My Harold and I disagreed about plenty. Didn't stop our kids from coming around after he passed." Bill turned back to the window, unwilling to explain that it wasn't just a disagreement. It was Bill insisting on treatments that had made Martha's final months a misery, against her wishes, against Michael's pleas to let her go peacefully. It was accusations thrown in grief, Michael calling him selfish, Bill calling Michael uncaring. It was 3 years of silence that grew harder to break with each passing day. The Urgent Care Center was housed in a modern one-story building with a blue awning. The waiting room was half full when they arrived. An elderly man with an oxygen tank, a mother with a feverish toddler, a teenage boy holding an ice pack to his swollen wrist. Bill approached the reception desk with trepidation. "I don't have a referral," he told the young receptionist after giving his name and date of birth. "I'm not sure if my insurance—" "We'll figure that out," she said, handing him a clipboard with forms. "Fill these out, and someone will call you back soon." Soon turned out to be 90 minutes. Bill shifted uncomfortably in the hard plastic chair, trying not to scratch his increasingly painful wounds. Eleanor had insisted on waiting with him, leafing through outdated magazines and occasionally making disapproving noises about the wait time. "William Peterson?" A young nurse in blue scrubs finally called from a doorway. Bill stood, wavering slightly. The wounds on his legs seemed to throb in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Want me to come back with you?" Eleanor asked. "I'm not an invalid," Bill snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. "Sorry. I'll be fine. Thank you for the ride." The nurse led him to an examination room, took his vitals, and asked a series of questions about his symptoms. Bill described the progression of the marks, the itching, the recent development of pain. He omitted the disturbing movement he thought he'd seen on the video, unwilling to sound like a senile old man. "The doctor will be in shortly," the nurse said, leaving him alone in the sterile room. Shortly turned out to be another 40 minutes. By the time the door opened again, Bill had counted every ceiling tile twice and read every word on the diabetes management poster on the wall. Doctor. Sarah Mitchell was younger than Bill expected, mid-30s at most, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and rectangular glasses that gave her a scholarly appearance. She greeted him with a brisk professionalism that neither welcomed nor dismissed. "Mr. Peterson, I understand you're having some skin issues," she said, reviewing his chart. "Let's take a look." Bill rolled up his pant legs, revealing the angry red welts that now covered both calves. Dr. Mitchell's professional demeanor slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening slightly before she composed herself. "How long have these been developing?" she asked, pulling on latex gloves. "About 2 weeks. Started with just a few, but they keep spreading." She examined the wounds carefully, her touch clinical but gentle. "Any fever, chills, fatigue?" "Some fatigue. Haven't checked for fever." Dr. Mitchell frowned, pressing lightly around one of the larger welts. Bill winced. "Sorry," she said. "These appear to be infected. Have you tried any treatments at home?" Bill explained his bedbug theory and the various over-the-counter remedies he'd attempted. Dr. Mitchell listened while continuing her examination, occasionally making notes on her tablet. "I don't think these are bedbug bites," she said finally. "The pattern and progression suggest something else. I'm going to prescribe an antibiotic cream and oral antibiotics for the infection. I'd also like to take a culture to identify exactly what we're dealing with." She swabbed one of the wounds, causing Bill to grip the examination table tightly against the pain. "Have you traveled recently, Mr. Peterson? Or had contact with any unusual animals or environments?" "No travel. Just my house and around the neighborhood." Dr. Mitchell made another note. "Any pre-existing conditions I should know about?" "High blood pressure. Touch of arthritis." Bill hesitated. "My wife died of cancer 7 years ago." "Pancreatic." The doctor glanced up from her tablet, her expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss. Do you have family nearby?" "No," Bill said shortly, not wanting to elaborate. Dr. Mitchell seemed to sense his reluctance. "Is there someone who can help you apply the topical medication to the areas you can't easily reach?" Bill thought of Eleanor, of the humiliation of asking his neighbor to apply cream to his back. "I'll manage." Dr. Mitchell looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. "I want to see you again in 3 days to check how these are responding to the antibiotics. Sooner if they worsen or if you develop a fever. The infection is concerning, Mr. Peterson." After providing instructions for the medications and scheduling the follow-up appointment, Dr. Mitchell left him to dress. Bill sat on the examination table for a moment, suddenly exhausted. The visit had cost him $75 in copay, and the prescriptions would be another expense. But at least he had a plan now. Antibiotics would clear up the infection, and he could put this embarrassing episode behind him. Eleanor was still waiting when he emerged, rising from her seat with an expectant look. "Well, what did the doctor say?" "Infected bug bites," Bill replied, simplifying Dr. Mitchell's assessment. "Gave me a prescription for antibiotics." "We'll stop at the pharmacy on the way home," Eleanor said decisively. The pharmacy visit added another layer of financial anxiety. Even with his Medicare Part D coverage, the oral antibiotics cost $42.67, and the topical cream another $35. Bill handed over his credit card with reluctance, knowing the balance was already precariously high. That night, after taking the first dose of antibiotics with a dinner of Eleanor's casserole, Bill sat on the edge of his bathtub and carefully applied the cream to the wounds he could reach. The bathroom mirror reflected a man he barely recognized, thin, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. Martha's voice seemed to whisper from the medicine cabinet where her toiletries still sat, untouched since her death. "You need to take better care of yourself, Bill." "I'm trying now," he murmured to the empty bathroom. Before bed, Bill checked his answering machine out of habit. There were never any messages. To his surprise, the light was blinking. One new message. He pressed play. "This is Palm Haven Community Bank calling for William Peterson regarding your mortgage payment. Please call us back at your earliest convenience to discuss your account status." Bill closed his eyes briefly. The mortgage payment. In the chaos of the past weeks, he'd forgotten it was overdue. Another problem for tomorrow. Sleep came fitfully that night. The wounds throbbed despite the medication, and when he did drift off, his dreams were troubled, dark shapes moving beneath the surface of still water. Martha calling his name from rooms he couldn't reach. Michael as a child asking questions Bill couldn't answer. He woke at dawn, sheets damp with sweat, to find 3 new welts on his right arm. 3 days of antibiotics should have shown some improvement. Instead, Bill's condition deteriorated with alarming speed. The original welts darkened and expanded while new ones appeared on his torso and arms. The pain had evolved from uncomfortable to nearly unbearable, a constant burning sensation that intensified with movement. Worst of all was the occasional sensation of movement beneath his skin, subtle ripples that made him question his sanity. "This isn't working," he muttered to himself on the morning of his follow-up appointment. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night in his recliner because lying down seemed to aggravate the pain. The television had kept him company until dawn, infomercials and old westerns blurring together as he drifted in and out of consciousness. Eleanor arrived precisely at 10:15 a.m. to drive him back to the urgent care center. She took one look at him and nearly dropped her purse. "My God, Bill. You look terrible." He couldn't argue with her assessment. His reflection that morning had frightened even him, hollow-eyed, ashen, with a slight tremor in his hands that hadn't been there before. The waiting room at Bayshore Urgent Care was busier than before, but the receptionist took one look at Bill and immediately called a nurse. This time, he didn't protest when Eleanor insisted on accompanying him to the examination room. Dr. Mitchell entered almost immediately, her usual brisk demeanor replaced by obvious concern when she saw Bill's condition. "Mr. Peterson," she said, quickly pulling on gloves, "I understand the antibiotics haven't improved your condition." "They've made it worse," Bill said, his voice raspier than he expected. "Or at least, it's getting worse despite them." Dr. Mitchell examined the wounds, her frown deepening as she documented the changes. She pressed lightly around a particularly large welt on his forearm, and Bill couldn't suppress a gasp of pain. "I'm concerned about the progression," she said frankly. "These aren't responding to the antibiotics as expected, which suggests we might not be dealing with a typical bacterial infection." She glanced at Eleanor. "Are you family?" "Neighbor," Eleanor replied. "His son lives out of state." Dr. Mitchell nodded, returning her attention to Bill. "Mr. Peterson, I'd like to take a small biopsy from one of these lesions. It will help us identify exactly what we're dealing with. I'm also going to refer you to a dermatologist who specializes in unusual infections." Bill nodded wearily. At this point, he'd agree to almost anything to stop the pain. The biopsy procedure was quick, but excruciating. Dr. Mitchell numbed a small area on his arm, but the local anesthetic seemed barely effective. When she extracted a tiny piece of tissue from the center of a welt, Bill nearly passed out from the sharp, burning pain. "I'm sorry," Dr. Mitchell said, applying a bandage to the biopsy site. "We'll rush this to the lab. Meanwhile, I'm changing your antibiotic and adding a strong anti-inflammatory. I'm also giving you something for the pain." As she wrote the prescriptions, Dr. Mitchell hesitated. "Mr. Peterson, do you have someone who can stay with you? Given your condition, I don't think you should be alone." "I'll be fine," Bill insisted automatically. "He most certainly will not be fine," Eleanor interjected. "Doctor, is there any risk of contagion? I have a spare bedroom, but I need to know if whatever this is could spread." "Based on the presentation, I don't believe it's contagious," Dr. Mitchell replied. "But we'll know more after the biopsy results." Bill opened his mouth to protest but was interrupted by a sharp, stabbing pain in his calf that momentarily took his breath away. Dr. Mitchell noticed immediately. "Mr. Peterson." "What's happening?" "Just a cramp," he managed, though it felt like something far worse, as if something was moving, tearing through muscle. Dr. Mitchell looked skeptical but didn't push. "The dermatologist can see you tomorrow morning. I've made an appointment for 9 a.m. with Dr. Robert Blackwell. He's one of the best in the area for unusual cases." She handed him the prescriptions and a business card. "And please call this number day or night if your symptoms worsen significantly before then." In the car, Eleanor was uncharacteristically quiet. Bill leaned his head against the cool window glass, grateful for the momentary relief it provided from his fever. "You're staying with me tonight," Eleanor finally said as they pulled into the pharmacy parking lot. No arguments. Bill wanted to refuse, to maintain his independence, but the reality of his situation was becoming impossible to ignore. What if he lost consciousness alone in his house? What if whatever was happening to him continued to worsen? Reluctantly, he nodded. Just for tonight, he conceded, until we know more. The new prescriptions were even more expensive than the first round, nearly $120 even with his insurance. Bill handed over his credit card, pushing away thoughts of his already strained finances. What choice did he have? Eleanor helped him pack an overnight bag after they returned to his house. As she moved efficiently around his bedroom, gathering toiletries and clean clothes, Bill eased himself into his recliner, suddenly overwhelmed by the situation. "I should call Michael," he said quietly, more to himself than to Eleanor. She paused, holding a pair of his pajamas. "Yes, you should. He deserves to know what's happening." Bill nodded, but made no move toward the phone. How would that conversation even start after 3 years of silence? "Hello, son. Sorry for not calling. By the way, I'm being eaten alive by something the doctors can't identify." The pain medication Dr. Mitchell prescribed took the edge off his discomfort, allowing him to doze on Eleanor's floral-patterned guest bed that evening. The room was cluttered with her late husband's belongings: fishing trophies, model airplanes, photographs of Harold in his Coast Guard uniform. Bill had attended Harold's funeral 4 years ago, standing awkwardly at the periphery of Eleanor's grief, unable to offer the comfort of someone who had moved beyond their own loss. Mourning brought no improvement. If anything, Bill felt worse, feverish, with an alarming weakness in his legs. Eleanor helped him dress, tactfully looking away as he struggled with his shirt buttons, his fingers clumsy and uncooperative. Dr. Robert Blackwell's office was located in a modern medical complex near the regional hospital. Unlike the urgent care's utilitarian setting, his waiting room featured comfortable leather chairs, tasteful artwork, and a bubbling aquarium. It screamed expensive specialist, making Bill acutely aware of the potential cost of this visit. They barely had time to sit down before a nurse called his name. "The doctor is ready for you, Mr. Peterson." Dr. Blackwell was not what Bill expected. In his late 60s, with a full head of silver hair and horn-rimmed glasses, he had the distinguished appearance of an old-school physician. His handshake was firm, his manner direct but compassionate. "Mr. Peterson, I've reviewed the notes from Dr. Mitchell," he said, gesturing for Bill to take a seat on the examination table. "She's concerned, and after seeing you, I understand why. Let's take a closer look at what's happening." Dr. Blackwell's examination was methodical and thorough. He didn't just look at the wounds, he measured them, photographed them, and used a specialized magnifying lens to examine their structure. Throughout the process, he asked detailed questions about Bill's daily routine, diet, and environment. "You mentioned to Dr. Mitchell that you haven't traveled recently," he said, making notes in a leather-bound journal rather than a computer. "What about before that? Any international travel in the past year or so?" Bill shook his head. "Not since my wife passed, 7 years ago." "And you live alone? Any pets? Recent changes to your home environment? New furniture, carpeting, plants?" "No pets. No changes." Bill paused, then remembered. "Well, I did replace my mattress about a month ago when I thought I had bedbugs." Dr. Blackwell looked up sharply. "Where did you purchase this mattress?" "Discount Furniture Warehouse on Highway 19. It was on clearance. A floor model." The doctor made another note. "Any idea where it was manufactured?" Bill frowned. "Should I have asked that when buying a mattress?" Dr. Blackwell smiled slightly. "Most people don't. I'm just trying to establish any possible vectors for what we're seeing here." He set down his notebook. "Mr. Peterson, I'd like to perform a more extensive biopsy under local anesthetic. I'm concerned about the appearance of these lesions, particularly this characteristic central depression with raised edges." "Will it hurt?" Bill asked, hating how vulnerable he sounded. "We'll do our best to minimize discomfort," Dr. Blackwell assured him. "But I won't lie to you. It will be uncomfortable. The good news is that it will give us definitive answers. The procedure was indeed uncomfortable, despite the stronger local anesthetic Dr. Blackwell used. Bill gripped the edges of the examination table as the doctor extracted a larger tissue sample from a welt on his upper arm. "I'm sending this to our lab for immediate analysis," Dr. Blackwell said as he bandaged the site. "I've also requested the results from your previous biopsy. While we wait, I'd like to start you on a different treatment regimen. I suspect we're dealing with something more specific than a general bacterial infection." A nurse entered with a tray containing several vials and a syringe. Dr. Blackwell explained, "This is a broad-spectrum anti-parasitic medication. If what I suspect is correct, this should be more effective than the antibiotics." "Anti-parasitic," Bill repeated, the word sending a chill through him despite his fever. "You think I have parasites?" Dr. Blackwell's expression was carefully neutral. "Let's not get ahead of the test results. This is a precautionary measure based on the presentation of your symptoms. The injection burned going in, another layer of pain atop Bill's existing discomfort." As the nurse dressed the injection site, Dr. Blackwell's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then excused himself from the room. Eleanor, who had been sitting quietly in the corner during the procedure, moved to Bill's side. "You're doing great," she said, patting his hand awkwardly. "Dr. Blackwell seems very thorough." Bill attempted a smile that felt more like a grimace. "He thinks I have parasites, Eleanor, like some kind of—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The implications too disturbing. Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened and Dr. Blackwell returned, accompanied by a nurse pushing a portable ultrasound machine. "Mr. Peterson," Dr. Blackwell said, his tone carefully controlled, "the preliminary results from your first biopsy have come in. They show some anomalies that I'd like to investigate further with an ultrasound, if you're agreeable." Bill nodded numbly, alarmed by the doctor's suddenly guarded demeanor. The nurse positioned the ultrasound next to the examination table, while Dr. Blackwell pulled on fresh gloves. "This gel will feel cold," he warned, applying a clear gel to one of the larger welts on Bill's calf. He then pressed the ultrasound wand against the area, his eyes fixed on the small screen. The room fell silent except for the soft whirring of the machine. Bill couldn't see the screen from his position, but he could see Dr. Blackwell's expression change subtly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight pursing of the lips. "What is it?" Bill asked, unable to bear the suspense. "What do you see?" Dr. Blackwell adjusted the wand slightly, pressing a button to freeze the image. He turned the screen toward Bill. "Do you see this darker area here with the small, elongated shape inside?" Bill squinted at the grainy black-and-white image. In the center of what appeared to be a fluid-filled cavity was a small, oblong object. As he stared, he could have sworn it moved slightly, though that might have been his imagination or a trick of the ultrasound. "What am I looking at?" he asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Dr. Blackwell's voice was measured, professional. "Mr. Peterson, the biopsy results and this ultrasound confirm that we're dealing with a parasitic infection. Specifically, these appear to be larvae of Dermatobia hominis, commonly known as the human botfly." "Larvae?" Bill repeated, the word barely comprehensible. "You mean there are living organisms developing beneath your skin?" Dr. Blackwell confirmed. "Based on what I'm seeing, they're in various stages of development." The room seemed to tilt around Bill. He heard Eleanor gasp, felt her hand grip his shoulder tightly. "How?" he managed. "How is this possible?" "Botfly infestations typically occur in tropical regions, Central and South America primarily," Dr. Blackwell explained. "The adult flies capture mosquitoes or other blood-feeding insects and attach their eggs to them. When the mosquito feeds on a human host, the eggs are transferred. The larvae then burrow into the skin, where they develop." "But I haven't been to those places," Bill protested weakly. Dr. Blackwell nodded. "That's what makes your case unusual. However, we've seen a few similar cases in Florida recently, particularly among the elderly population. One theory is that imported goods, furniture, clothing, even certain foods, may be introducing these parasites to non-endemic regions." The mattress, Bill thought with horror, the discount mattress that had been his first suspect all along. "Can you remove them?" Eleanor asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Yes," Dr. Blackwell replied. "Given the number and location of the larvae, I recommend surgical extraction under sedation. We'll need to remove each one individually to ensure no parts remain that could cause further infection." "When?" Bill asked, trying to process the reality of what was happening to him. "As soon as possible. I'd like to admit you to Bayshore Memorial today and schedule the procedure for tomorrow morning." Bill's mind immediately went to the practical implications. "My insurance—" "Let's focus on your health first," Dr. Blackwell interrupted gently. "The hospital has financial counselors who can discuss payment options after we've addressed the immediate medical concern." As they discussed the logistics of hospital admission, Bill felt strangely detached, as if he were observing someone else's medical crisis. Parasites, living creatures growing inside him. It seemed impossible, like something from a horror movie, not something that happened to retired history teachers in Florida retirement communities. A nurse entered with admission paperwork, interrupting his thoughts. As Bill began filling out the forms, his hand trembled so badly that Eleanor had to take over. Emergency contact information, insurance details, advance directives. Each section reminded him of his isolation. No family to list, no one to make decisions if he became incapacitated. "Should I put myself as your emergency contact?" Eleanor asked hesitantly. Bill stared at the blank line on the form. Martha's name had occupied that space for nearly 50 years. After her death, he'd replaced it with Michael's, even as their relationship deteriorated. Now— "Yes," he said finally. "Thank you, Eleanor." As they completed the paperwork, a hospital transporter arrived with a wheelchair. The reality of the situation suddenly hit Bill with full force. This was happening. He was being admitted to the hospital to have parasitic larvae surgically removed from his body. "I need to make a call first," he said abruptly. "Before we go." Dr. Blackwell nodded understandingly. "Of course. The nurse can show you to a private room." In the small consultation room, Bill stared at his cell phone. Michael's number was still in his contacts, unchanged since their last conversation 3 years ago. Would it even still work? Would Michael even answer if he saw his father's name on the caller ID? Bill's finger hovered over the call button. Pride warred with necessity, stubbornness with fear. What would Martha advise in this moment? The answer came clearly, almost as if she were standing beside him. "Swallow your pride, Bill. Your son deserves to know." With a deep breath, Bill pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. He was about to hang up when the line connected. "Dad?" Michael's voice, deeper than Bill remembered, cautious but not cold. "Michael," Bill said, his voice cracking slightly. I need to tell you something." The admission process at Bayshore Memorial Hospital unfolded in a blur of forms, questions, and medical jargon. Bill found himself wheeled through sterile corridors under flickering fluorescent lights, past rooms where other patients' dramas played out behind partially drawn curtains. The wheelchair felt like an admission of defeat, but his legs had grown too weak to carry him reliably. A young nurse named Amber helped transfer him to a hospital bed in a semi-private room. Thankfully, the other bed was empty, giving Bill a small measure of privacy. Eleanor had insisted on accompanying him, hovering anxiously as the nurse took his vital signs and inserted an IV line. "Your blood pressure is quite elevated, Mr. Peterson," Amber noted, frowning at the monitor. "Are you in pain right now?" "Some," Bill admitted, though "some" was a gross understatement. The burning sensation had intensified, and he could swear he felt movement beneath his skin with each heartbeat. "Dr. Blackwell ordered pain medication for you," she said, injecting something into his IV. "This should help while we prepare for tomorrow's procedure." The effect was almost immediate. A warm wave that dulled the sharp edges of his discomfort and made the room seem slightly fuzzy around the edges. Bill sank deeper into the pillows, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. "Better?" Amber asked with a kind smile. Bill nodded, words requiring too much effort. "A hospital representative will be by to discuss financial matters," she continued, adjusting his IV, "and Dr. Blackwell will check in later this afternoon." After she left, Eleanor settled into the visitor's chair with her knitting, apparently prepared for a long stay. "You should rest," she said, needles clicking rhythmically. "I'll be right here." "You don't have to stay," Bill murmured, eyelids growing heavy from the medication. "Hush," Eleanor replied. "What else would I do? Watch my soaps alone?" Despite the drugs dampening his pain, sleep eluded Bill. His mind churned with the morning's revelations. Parasites. Living creatures growing inside him. Each time he started to drift off, the mental image of larvae writhing beneath his skin jolted him back to consciousness. Worse were the financial anxieties lurking just behind the medical ones. His Medicare coverage was decent, but the supplemental policy had a high deductible and limited coverage for specialized treatments. The savings account he'd once thought adequate for retirement had been depleted by Martha's extended illness, leaving little cushion for his own medical crisis. A soft knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. A woman in a navy blue blazer entered, holding a tablet computer. "Mr. Peterson, I'm Denise from Patient Financial Services. Do you have a few minutes to discuss your stay with us?" Eleanor set down her knitting, suddenly alert. "Is this really necessary right now?" "He's just been admitted." Denise's professional smile never wavered. "It's standard procedure, ma'am. Just a few questions about insurance coverage and payment options." The conversation that followed confirmed Bill's worst fears. His Medicare and supplemental policy would cover only about 70% of the estimated costs. The remaining balance, potentially thousands of dollars, would be his responsibility. Denise outlined payment plans with the detached efficiency of someone discussing a car loan, not a life-saving procedure. "We can also place a temporary hold on your credit card for the estimated out-of-pocket expenses," she suggested. Bill almost laughed. The balance on his single credit card was already approaching its modest limit after the prescription costs. "What happens if I can't pay?" he asked, the medication making him more direct than he might otherwise have been. Denise's smile tightened slightly. "Let's not worry about that right now, Mr. Peterson. We have financial assistance programs for qualifying patients. We can explore those options after your treatment." After she left, Eleanor's knitting needles clicked with increased agitation. "Vultures," she muttered, "circling before you're even treated." Bill closed his eyes, not wanting her to see his humiliation. A lifetime of self-sufficiency reduced to this, lying in a hospital bed, unable to pay for the care he desperately needed. What would Martha think of him now? The afternoon crawled by in a haze of intermittent dozing and medical interruptions. A phlebotomist came to draw blood. A resident physician examined his wounds and asked the same questions Dr. Blackwell had already covered. A dietary aide brought a dinner tray with unidentifiable meat in pale gravy. Eleanor finally left around 7 p.m., promising to return in the morning before his procedure. Alone in the dimming room, Bill found himself reaching for his cell phone, checking again for any response from Michael. Their conversation had been brief and strained. Bill had explained the basics of his condition, downplaying both the severity and his fear. Michael had listened mostly in silence, asking a few clinical questions about the diagnosis and treatment plan. "I can fly down," Michael had offered tentatively. "No need," Bill had responded automatically. Decades of stoic self-reliance impossible to overcome, even now. "It's a simple procedure. I'll be fine." Michael hadn't pushed and Bill hadn't elaborated. The call had ended with an awkward promise to update each other, the vast gulf between them unbridged. Now, staring at the phone's dark screen, Bill regretted his stubborn pride. What was he trying to prove, and to whom? Martha was gone. Michael had his own life. No one was keeping score of Bill Peterson's independence anymore. A soft knock roused him from his thoughts. Dr. Blackwell entered, looking more casual in blue scrubs, but no less authoritative. "Evening, Mr. Peterson. How are you feeling?" "Like I have bugs living under my skin," Bill replied dryly. Dr. Blackwell's lips quirked in a small smile. "Fair enough. I've reviewed your labs. Your white blood cell count is elevated, indicating your body is fighting hard against these invaders. We've scheduled your procedure for 9 a.m. tomorrow." He pulled up a chair beside the bed, an unexpected gesture that made Bill sit up straighter. "I want to explain exactly what we'll be doing," Dr. Blackwell said. "The larvae have created small encapsulated pockets beneath your skin. We'll need to make a small incision over each one, carefully extract the larva without rupturing it, then clean and close the wound. It's delicate work, which is why we'll have you under conscious sedation." "How many?" Bill asked, dreading the answer. Dr. Blackwell hesitated. "Based on our ultrasound and visual examination, we've identified approximately 23 distinct sites." The number hit Bill like a physical blow. 23? There are 23 things living inside me? "I understand how disturbing this is," Dr. Blackwell said, his voice gentle but matter-of-fact. "But it's important to remember that this is a treatable condition. Once the larvae are removed and you complete a course of antiparasitics, you should recover fully." Bill nodded numbly, trying to process the reality of his situation. "Do you have any questions for me?" Dr. Blackwell asked. A dozen questions crowded Bill's mind, but one pushed to the forefront. "How did this happen? Really? I understand about tropical flies and mosquitoes, but I haven't left Florida in years." Dr. Blackwell leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "We've seen several similar cases recently, primarily among elderly patients in Florida retirement communities. My colleagues and I have been investigating possible vectors. One common factor has been recently purchased imported furniture, particularly from discount warehouses that don't always follow proper fumigation protocols for international shipments." "My new mattress," Bill murmured. "Possibly," Dr. Blackwell agreed. "We're working with health authorities to trace these cases back to their sources. Your case may help prevent others from experiencing the same thing." The thought provided little comfort as Bill contemplated the long night ahead, knowing what was growing beneath his skin. After Dr. Blackwell left, a night nurse came to check Bill's vitals and administer another dose of pain medication. As the drug took effect, Bill drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, his dreams populated by crawling things and Martha's voice calling from somewhere he couldn't reach. He woke disoriented in the pre-dawn darkness, his hospital gown damp with sweat. The pain had intensified despite the medication, concentrated now in several specific points on his arms and legs. Worst was a spot on his upper thigh that throbbed with each heartbeat. Bill fumbled for the call button, then hesitated. What would they do? Give him more drugs that barely touched the pain? Tell him to wait for the morning procedure? He'd endured worse pain during Martha's illness, sitting helplessly as she grimaced through the agony of advanced cancer. This was nothing by comparison. Still, a nagging voice in his mind, Martha's voice, urged him to get help. "Don't be a martyr, Bill," she would have said. "There's no prize for suffering in silence." Before he could press the button, his phone lit up on the bedside table. An incoming call at... He squinted at the screen. 4:37 a.m. Michael's name flashed on the display. "Hello?" Bill answered, voice rough with sleep and pain. "Dad." Michael sounded wide awake, his voice tight with an emotion Bill couldn't identify. "I'm at the airport in Atlanta. My connecting flight to Tampa leaves in an hour." Bill struggled to comprehend. "You're coming here? I told you there was no need." "I know what you told me," Michael interrupted. "I also know you've never asked for help in your life, even when you needed it. I spoke with your doctor, Dad." A flash of indignation cut through Bill's pain fog. "You had no right to..." "I had every right," Michael shot back, then seemed to catch himself. When he spoke again, his voice was calmer. "I'm a doctor, Dad, a specialist in tropical medicine. Did you know that?" Bill blinked in surprise. "No. I thought you were still teaching biology at the university." "I was. Then I went to medical school, finished my residency 3 years ago." A pause. "I tried to tell you. I called dozens of times that first year. You never picked up." The revelation stunned Bill into silence. His son, a doctor, specializing in tropical medicine of all things. And Bill had been too stubborn, too wrapped up in his own grief and guilt to even know. "Dr. Blackwell sent me your file," Michael continued into the silence. "Those aren't common botfly larvae, Dad. They're a subspecies rarely seen outside specific regions of Brazil. I've treated similar cases. It's my actual field of expertise." Bill struggled to absorb this information, his mind slowed by pain and medication. "How is that possible?" "That's what I intend to find out," Michael replied, determination hardening his voice. "I'll be there by 8 a.m. Don't let them start any procedures until I arrive." After the call ended, Bill lay awake, pain momentarily overshadowed by the implications of Michael's revelation. His son was flying across the country to help him. His son was a doctor specializing in the very condition afflicting him. The coincidence seemed too great, almost like... "Martha," Bill whispered into the dim room. "You orchestrated this somehow, didn't you?" Morning arrived with the hospital's mechanical efficiency, shift changes, vital checks, breakfast trays. Bill picked at the bland oatmeal, stomach churning with equal parts pain and anxiety. Eleanor arrived at 7:30 carrying a small duffel bag with clean clothes and toiletries from his house. "You look terrible," she announced by way of greeting. "Didn't they give you anything for pain?" "It doesn't help much," Bill admitted. "But it won't matter soon. The procedure's at 9. Eleanor settled into the visitor's chair, unpacking magazines and a thermos of what smelled like real coffee. "I ran into Nurse Margaret at the front desk. She said she'd be checking on you." "Who?" Bill asked, momentarily confused. "Margaret Wilson. She works here part-time. She was asking about you specifically." Before Bill could question this further, the door opened. A transport orderly entered with a wheelchair. "Mr. Peterson." "I'm here to take you down to pre-op." "No," Bill said firmly, surprising himself with his vehemence. "My son is coming. He's a doctor. I need to wait for him." The orderly looked uncertain. "I have orders to bring you down now, sir. They need to prep you for the procedure." "Please," Bill said, hating the pleading note in his voice. "Just check with Dr. Blackwell. My son called him this morning. He should be arriving any minute." The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of a nurse, an older woman with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes behind practical glasses. Her name tag read Margaret Wilson, RN. "I'll handle this, Tommy," she told the orderly, who seemed relieved to escape the situation. Margaret turned to Bill with a warm smile that somehow seemed familiar. "Mr. Peterson, I understand your son is joining us this morning?" "Yes," Bill replied, studying her face. "Do I know you?" "Eleanor said you were asking about me." Margaret's smile softened further. "We've never met formally, but I knew your wife. Martha and I were in the same cancer support group at First Presbyterian." The connection hit Bill like a physical blow. Martha had attended those weekly meetings religiously during her treatment, finding comfort and understanding among others walking the same difficult path. "She talked about you often," Margaret continued, checking Bill's IV with practiced efficiency. "She worried about how you would manage on your own. You were her whole world, you know." Bill felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "She never mentioned you." "She wouldn't have," Margaret said simply. Martha was private about those meetings. They were her space to be afraid, to be angry, to be something other than brave for everyone else. She adjusted Bill's blanket with a maternal touch. "I promised her I'd keep an eye on you when the time came. I've been trying to, from a distance." Before Bill could process this revelation, a commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, then the door burst open. The man who entered was both familiar and a stranger. Michael's features, but older, more assured than Bill remembered. He wore rumpled clothes, suggesting an overnight flight, carried a leather briefcase, and had the focused intensity Bill recognized from looking in the mirror during his teaching days. "Dad," Michael said, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. For a moment they stared at each other, 7 years of silence stretching between them. Then Michael did something completely unexpected. He leaned down and embraced his father, careful of the IV lines but firm enough to communicate everything words had failed to say. "I'm here," Michael said simply, straightening up, "and I'm going to help fix this." Michael's transformation from the angry, grieving son Bill remembered to the confident medical professional standing before him was jarring. He moved with purpose, immediately reviewing the chart hanging at the foot of the bed, asking pointed questions about medication dosages and vital sign patterns. The night nurse answered respectfully, clearly recognizing a physician's authority despite Michael's rumpled appearance. "I need to speak with Dr. Blackwell before any procedure begins," Michael stated, not a request, but a professional courtesy. "He's in the surgical prep area, Dr. Peterson," the nurse replied. "I can page him." Dr. Peterson. The title applied to his son struck Bill with unexpected force. While he'd been shutting out the world, retreating into his grief and isolation, Michael had rebuilt his life, transformed it into something meaningful. Pride mingled with shame in Bill's chest. "Michael," Bill said, his voice raspier than he intended. "You didn't have to come all this way." Michael turned, his expression softening as he met his father's gaze. "Yes, I did." He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat, suddenly looking exhausted beneath his professional demeanor. "Dad, we have a lot to talk about, but right now we need to focus on your condition. These aren't ordinary botfly larvae. The subspecies Dr. Blackwell identified is extremely rare outside specific regions of Brazil. So I've got exotic bugs." Bill attempted a weak joke. "Always did like to stand out." Michael didn't smile. "This variant is more aggressive than the common botfly. They burrow deeper, develop faster, and can cause significant tissue damage if not removed properly." He hesitated, then added, "They're also capable of migrating through tissue toward major blood vessels and organs." The clinical description sent a chill through Bill despite the warmth of the hospital room. "Are you saying they could kill me?" "If left untreated." "Eventually, yes." Michael's directness was both terrifying and oddly comforting. No sugarcoating, no patronizing reassurances. "But we're going to treat it. I've handled cases like this before." Before Bill could respond, a sharp, excruciating pain lanced through his right thigh, exactly where one of the largest welts had formed. He gasped, instinctively grabbing at the site. Michael was instantly alert, pulling back the blanket to examine the area. Through the thin hospital gown, a disturbing movement was visible beneath the skin, a rippling that seemed to pulse in time with Bill's racing heartbeat. "Nurse!" Michael called sharply. "Page Dr. Blackwell now. Tell him we need to move up the procedure, and get me a portable ultrasound." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Dr. Blackwell arrived, quickly conferring with Michael in the professional shorthand of physicians. The ultrasound confirmed Michael's concerns. Several of the larvae had become more active, pushing against blood vessel walls. The risk of rupture and potentially fatal complications had increased dramatically overnight. "We need to get you into surgery immediately," Dr. Blackwell told Bill, no longer the calm, reassuring specialist, but a physician responding to an emergency. "Dr. Peterson and I will perform the procedure together." "My son is going to operate on me?" Bill asked, trying to process this surreal development. "He's one of the few physicians in the country with specific experience treating this parasite variant," Dr. Blackwell replied. "We're fortunate he's here." As the transport team prepared to move him, Bill caught Michael's arm. "Wait," he said urgently. "The cost, I can't afford this. The financial services woman already said my insurance won't cover everything." Michael's expression hardened. "Don't worry about that now, Dad." "I can't saddle you with my medical debt," Bill insisted. "I won't be a burden to you." "A burden?" Michael repeated, genuine confusion in his voice. "Dad, you're not a burden. You're my father." He squeezed Bill's shoulder gently. "Let me help you. Please." The plea, so simple, so heartfelt, broke something in Bill's chest. How many times had he refused help out of pride? How many connections had he severed by insisting on his self-reliance? As they wheeled him toward the surgical suite, Bill felt tears leak from the corners of his eyes, not from pain but from the realization of how deeply he had isolated himself. In the pre-op area, a flurry of activity surrounded him. Consent forms hastily signed, surgical sites marked, IV medications adjusted. Through it all, Michael remained nearby, a steady presence in the chaos. Just before they administered the sedative, Bill reached for his son's hand. "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate for all they needed to encompass. "For everything." Michael's fingers tightened around his. "Me too, Dad. We'll talk after. I promise." The sedative took effect quickly, drawing Bill into a twilight state, aware but detached, feeling pressure but not pain as the procedure began. He could hear the surgical team's voices, including Michael's, speaking in the measured tones of professionals focused on their work. "Specimen 1 extracted intact," Michael's voice, clinical yet somehow reassuring. "Moving to Site 2, Dr. Blackwell responded. "Larger than the first, careful with the extraction." Bill drifted in and out of full awareness, the voices becoming a distant hum as the medication deepened its hold. In this liminal space, memories floated to the surface. Martha, in their first apartment, laughing as she tried to cook spaghetti in their tiny kitchen. Michael, as a solemn-faced kindergartner, proudly showing his father a drawing of their family, the three of them camping in the Smoky Mountains, huddled in their tent during an unexpected rainstorm. When had those easy moments of connection slipped away? When had he started building walls instead of bridges? A sharp sensation from his leg pulled him briefly back to awareness. "This one's deeper than the others," Michael was saying, his voice tense with concentration. "It's adhered to the surrounding tissue." "BP's rising," a nurse reported. "He might be feeling this one." A cool hand touched Bill's forehead. "Nurse Margaret," he realized hazily. "You're doing fine, Mr. Peterson," she murmured. Just a little longer. Bill wanted to tell her about Martha, about how he'd failed to keep his promise to take care of himself, but the sedative pulled him back under before he could form the words. The next thing he was aware of was the recovery room, beeping monitors, hushed voices, the distinctive antiseptic smell of hospitals everywhere. His body felt heavy, distant, as if it belonged to someone else. The pain had transformed into a generalized throbbing rather than the sharp, localized agony of before. "He's waking up," someone said. Bill blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, trying to focus. Michael's face swam into view, lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes, but a relieved smile softening his features. "Hey, Dad," he said softly. "Surgery went well? We got them all." "All 23? Bill's voice was a raspy whisper. Michael's expression flickered briefly. "Actually, we found 27. 4 were developing in deeper tissue layers not visible on the initial scans." He squeezed Bill's hand gently. "But they're gone now, every last one." Bill closed his eyes, overwhelmed by a wave of relief so profound it brought fresh tears. "Thank you," he managed, "for coming, for helping." "That's what family does," Michael replied simply. Over the next few hours, as the sedation wore off, the full extent of the procedure became clear. Each larva had been carefully extracted, the surrounding tissue cleaned and, when necessary, repaired. The larger, deeper parasites had caused more damage, requiring additional surgical intervention. Bill's body was now a patchwork of bandages and surgical dressings, each marking a site where an invader had been removed. Dr. Blackwell visited that evening, looking tired but satisfied. "We've sent the specimens to the CDC for further analysis," he explained. "Your case may help identify the source of these infections and prevent others from experiencing the same thing." "The mattress," Bill said, remembering their earlier conversation. "From Discount Furniture Warehouse." "Most likely," Dr. Blackwell agreed. "Health authorities are already investigating several businesses importing goods from regions where this parasite is endemic. Your experience will add urgency to those investigations." After the doctor left, Bill turned to Michael, who had barely left his side since the surgery. "You should get some rest. You look exhausted." Michael smiled wryly. "That's my line. I'm the doctor here, remember? And I'm still your father," Bill countered, feeling a tentative reassertion of their natural relationship. Michael's smile faded, replaced by an expression of cautious hope. "Yes, you are." He hesitated, then added, "I've missed that, Dad. I've missed you." The simple admission opened a door Bill had thought permanently closed. "I've missed you too," he replied, the words coming easier than he expected. "More than I allowed myself to admit." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Eleanor poked her head in, her usual brusque manner softened by obvious relief at seeing Bill awake. "Well, you don't look half dead anymore," she announced, entering with a vase of cheerful daisies. "That's an improvement." Behind her came Nurse Margaret, pushing a medication cart. "Time for your antibiotics, Mr. Peterson," she said with a warm smile. "And I brought extra pillows to help position you more comfortably." As Margaret adjusted his IV, Bill studied her face, seeing now the subtle signs of age and weariness he'd missed before. "You knew Martha from the support group," he said, remembering their earlier conversation. "You promised her you'd keep an eye on me." Margaret nodded, her movements never pausing in their efficient care. "I did. She worried about you being alone." "But how?" Bill asked. "I never saw you before today." Margaret's smile turned slightly mischievous. "I volunteer at the community center where you get your weekly paper. I'm on the patient advocacy board here at Bayshore. I even attended your holiday band concert last year. You play a decent trombone for a man your age." Bill blinked in surprise. All those places, those activities he'd participated in minimally, going through the motions of social engagement without truly connecting, and she had been there, watching from a distance, keeping a promise to his wife. "Why didn't you just introduce yourself?" he asked. "Martha said you were stubborn as a mule," Margaret replied matter-of-factly. "Said you'd refuse help even if you were drowning. She made me promise to wait until you really needed someone, until you might be ready to accept it." The assessment was so accurate, so quintessentially Martha, that Bill felt a bittersweet ache in his chest. She had known him better than he knew himself, had anticipated his grief-driven isolation, and tried to create a safety net he wouldn't reject out of pride. "Well," Eleanor interjected, "seems to me near death by exotic bugs qualifies as really needing someone." Despite the pain, despite the circumstances, Bill found himself laughing, a rusty, unpracticed sound that surprised even him. "I suppose it does." That night, alone in his hospital room after Eleanor had gone home and Michael had reluctantly left to shower and rest at a nearby hotel, Bill lay awake, processing the events of the past days. His body ached from the multiple extraction sites, but the deep, terrifying sensation of movement beneath his skin was blessedly absent. More profound was the emotional shift he felt, as if something calcified within him had begun to crack and soften. For 7 years, he had been hardening himself against vulnerability, against connection, using his grief as both shield and excuse. Now, faced with his own mortality and the unexpected return of his son, those defenses seemed not just unnecessary but actively harmful. "You were right, Martha," he whispered into the dim room, "as usual." In the quiet hospital night, surrounded by machines monitoring his vital signs, Bill Peterson made a decision. If he survived this, and it seemed now that he would stop merely existing in the aftermath of Martha's death. He would start living again, reconnecting with the world she had loved so much, with the son who carried part of her spirit. It wouldn't be easy. The financial aftermath of this medical crisis loomed large, threatening the modest security of his retirement. His body would need time to heal from the invasive parasites and the surgical procedures to remove them. But for the first time in years, Bill felt something like hope, fragile but persistent, like the first green shoot after a long winter. The morning after surgery brought unwelcome visitors to Bill's hospital room. 2 representatives from the hospital's billing department arrived while he was attempting to eat the bland oatmeal that passed for breakfast. The younger woman, barely out of college by the look of her, clutched a tablet displaying figures that made Bill's already weak appetite vanish entirely. "As you can see, Mr. Peterson, the emergency nature of your procedure resulted in additional charges," she explained with practiced sympathy. "The surgical team, the specialized equipment, the extended time in the operating room, these all contributed to the final amount." Bill stared at the number on the screen. $47,635.82. After estimated insurance coverage, $18,942.37 patient responsibility. "There must be some mistake," he said, his voice barely audible. "I can't possibly pay that." The older representative, a man with thinning hair and a practiced smile, leaned forward. "We understand this is a significant amount, Mr. Peterson. That's why we offer payment plans. With your credit check, we can approve you for monthly payments of just $789.26 over 24 months. Nearly $800 a month when his Social Security and pension combined barely covered his mortgage, utilities, and basic living expenses." Bill felt the room tilt slightly, his heart racing in a way that made the monitor beside his bed beep in protest. "I don't have that kind of money," he admitted, hating the tremor in his voice. "My savings are almost gone after my wife's medical bills. I can't—" The door opened abruptly, interrupting his humiliating confession. Michael entered, freshly showered and changed, carrying a coffee cup and a leather briefcase. He assessed the situation instantly, medical training and filial instinct merging into a protective response. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice level but edged with authority. The younger woman brightened. "Dr. Peterson, we were just discussing your father's financial options for—" "My father had emergency surgery yesterday," Michael cut in. "He's still recovering. This is neither the time nor the place for financial discussions." "Hospital policy requires—" the man began. "I'm familiar with hospital policy," Michael interrupted again. "I'm also familiar with patient rights, including the right not to be pressured about financial matters during recovery from major surgery." He set down his coffee and opened the door wider. "We'll address these issues through proper channels when my father is medically stable. Good day." The representatives retreated, leaving behind a brochure about payment options that Michael promptly deposited in the trash. When they were gone, he turned to Bill with an apologetic expression. "I should have been here earlier. I'm sorry they ambushed you like that." Bill shook his head, still reeling from the numbers he'd seen. "Nearly $19,000, he said hollowly. "After insurance. I don't have that kind of money, Michael. The house is mortgaged. Martha's treatments ate through our savings. I might have $5,000 in the bank at most." Michael pulled a chair close to the bed and sat, his expression unreadable. "Dad, listen to me. The financial stuff. We'll figure it out. It's not your primary concern right now." "How can it not be?" Bill's voice rose slightly. "They could take the house, garnish my Social Security." "They won't," Michael said firmly, "because I've already spoken with the hospital administration. The parasitic infection you contracted is now part of a CDC investigation into improperly imported materials. This facility stands to receive significant research funding as a result of your case. They're highly motivated to work with us." Bill stared at his son, seeing in his confident handling of the situation echoes of Martha's practical approach to life's challenges. "You sound like your mother," he said softly. Michael's expression softened. "Highest compliment possible." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else we need to discuss, Dad, about your living situation during recovery." Bill tensed immediately. "I'm not going to a nursing home." "No one's suggesting that," Michael assured him. "But you can't stay alone at your house, at least not initially. The extraction sites need regular cleaning and dressing changes. You'll be on a complex medication regimen. You'll have limited mobility for at least 2 weeks. Eleanor offered her guest room, Bill said, though the thought of imposing on his neighbor for weeks made him deeply uncomfortable. Michael took a deep breath. "I'd like you to come stay with me." "In Boston?" The suggestion was so unexpected that Bill could only stare. "Boston? But your life, your work." "I've arranged a temporary leave from the hospital, 8 weeks. I have colleagues covering my patients. My apartment has a guest room with its own bathroom, no stairs to navigate." Michael leaned forward, his expression earnest. "It makes the most sense medically, Dad. I can monitor your recovery and ensure you're getting proper care." The practical reasons were sound, but Bill sensed something deeper beneath the offer, a tentative bridge being extended across the chasm of their estrangement. Still, the thought of being dependent on his son, of being a burden after years of silence, made him hesitate. "What about after?" he asked. "When I'm recovered, I'd be right back where I started, but with crushing medical debt." Michael sat back, studying his father's face. "That's something we should discuss, but not today. Today, let's focus on getting you well enough to leave this hospital, one step at a time, okay?" Before Bill could respond, Dr. Blackwell arrived for his morning examination. The news was cautiously positive. The extraction sites showed no signs of infection, Bill's vitals were stable, and blood tests indicated the anti-parasitic medications were working effectively. "You're not out of the woods yet," Dr. Blackwell cautioned, "but you're on the right path. I'd like to keep you here another 48 hours for observation, then discuss discharge planning." After he left, a nurse arrived with fresh dressings for Bill's wounds. Michael stayed, observing the procedure with a physician's clinical interest, but a son's empathetic winces at each sign of his father's discomfort. "The deeper ones still hurt," Bill admitted as the nurse worked on a particularly tender site on his thigh. "The larvae there were closest to major blood vessels," Michael explained. "They required more extensive removal and caused more tissue damage. Those will take longest to heal." When the dressing changes were complete, exhaustion washed over Bill. The pain medications made him drowsy, and the emotional toll of the morning's financial discussion had drained what little energy he had. Seeing his fatigue, Michael stood. "Get some rest, Dad. I'm going to make some calls, but I'll be back this afternoon." After Michael left, Bill dozed fitfully, his dreams a confusing mix of crawling sensations and Martha's voice calling from far away. He woke to find Eleanor arranging fresh flowers beside his bed, her brisk movements betraying her discomfort with hospitals. "Your son seems nice," she said by way of greeting. "A doctor, too. You must be proud." "I am," Bill replied, realizing as he said it how true it was. "Though I can't take much credit. His mother shaped him more than I did." Eleanor snorted. "That's not how he tells it." "He was in the cafeteria earlier, telling me stories about how you used to take him fossil hunting. Said it's what got him interested in science in the first place." The memory surfaced unexpectedly. Weekend trips to limestone quarries in Michigan, Michael's childish delight at finding ancient shells embedded in rock. Bill had forgotten those outings, those moments of connection that had apparently shaped his son's path in ways he'd never recognized. "He wants me to go to Boston with him," Bill said. "For my recovery." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Good. That guest room of mine has a lumpy mattress anyway." She paused, then added more gently, "It would be good for both of you, I think. Time to mend more than just your physical wounds." The afternoon brought another unexpected visitor. Nurse Margaret arrived during her shift break, carrying a worn leather journal that Bill recognized with a jolt, Martha's medical diary which he'd kept on his bedside table for 7 years. "Your son asked me to bring this from your house," Margaret explained, handing it to him. "Said you might want it while you're here." Bill took the journal, running his fingers over the softened leather cover. "Thank you. But how did Michael even know about this?" Margaret smiled. "He remembered it. Said his mother wrote in it every day during her treatments." She hesitated, then added, "He also asked me to tell you something. Martha made more than one entry about you." Puzzled, Bill opened the journal, turning past the familiar pages documenting medications, symptoms, and treatment plans. Near the back, he found sections he'd never noticed before, pages titled simply for Bill. Martha's handwriting filled the pages, not with medical observations but with letters to him, written during her final months, letters he'd never seen, never known existed. The first was dated just after her terminal diagnosis. "My dearest Bill, Dr. Reeves confirmed today what we've both suspected. The cancer has spread too far for treatment to be effective. I have months, not years. You weren't in the room when he told me. You were getting coffee, always taking care of me. And I asked him not to tell you yet. Selfish, perhaps, but I needed to process this myself first. I know you'll want to fight this. You've always been a fighter, my love. But this is one battle we cannot win, and I need you to understand that when the time comes, I don't want my final days spent in hospitals. I want to be home, with you, with Michael if he can come. I want to see our garden one last time, feel the Florida sunshine I waited so long to enjoy. Please don't let your grief turn to anger. Please don't push Michael away. He loves you so much, even when you both are too stubborn to say it. And please, when I'm gone, don't retreat from life. that would break my heart more than dying ever could. All my love, Martha. Bill's vision blurred with tears. She had known, all along she had known he would fight her diagnosis, would push for treatments she didn't want, would retreat into isolation after her death. She had seen it all coming and tried, in her gentle way, to prevent it. He turned the page, finding more letters, some reflective, some practical, all filled with the wisdom and love that had defined Martha throughout their marriage. The final entry was dated 3 days before her death, the handwriting shaky but determined. Bill, these will be my last words to you, I think. The pain is manageable with the hospice medications, but my strength is fading. I want you to know that you've made my life beautiful. From that first dance at Jennifer's wedding to these final days holding your hand, I have been blessed to be yours. I've asked Margaret to keep an eye on you. Don't be angry. I know how fiercely independent you are. But everyone needs someone, my love. Even you. Promise me you'll reconnect with Michael. You're both so alike, stubborn, principled, deeply feeling beneath those stoic exteriors. He'll need his father, and you'll need your son. The disagreements between you are nothing compared to the love that binds you. And Bill, promise me you'll live. Really live, not just exist. Join that community band you've talked about. Travel to those national parks on our list. Make new friends. Perhaps even find love again someday. I would be happy knowing you weren't alone. You've been the great love of my life. Now go and live the rest of yours. Forever yours, Martha. Bill closed the journal. Overcome. For 7 years, he'd been carrying Martha's final wishes with him, unread, unheeded. He'd done exactly what she'd feared, fought against her peaceful ending, pushed Michael away, retreated from life itself. The realization was both devastating and strangely liberating. It wasn't too late to honor what she'd wanted for him. When Michael returned that afternoon, he found his father changed, quieter, more contemplative, but somehow more present than he'd been since the hospitalization began. I read her letters, Bill said simply. Michael nodded, understanding immediately. I found them last year when I finally worked up the courage to visit the house while you were at your dental appointment. I didn't know if I should tell you about them. Why didn't you? Michael sat heavily in the visitor's chair. Because I was still angry, I guess, about how things ended with Mom, about how you shut me out afterward. He met his father's gaze directly. But mostly, I was angry at myself for not trying harder to bridge the gap, for letting pride keep me from reaching out again and again until you heard me. The honesty between them felt fragile but essential, like the first tender shoots of a plant pushing through hard soil. Bill thought of Martha's plea for them to reconnect, of all the years wasted in stubborn silence. I'd like to come to Boston, he said finally. Not just for my recovery. I think we have a lot of catching up to do. Michael's smile was tentative but genuine. Yeah, we do. He hesitated, then added, There's something else you should know, Dad. Something I've been trying to tell you for years. Bill braced himself, wondering what other revelations this day would bring. I'm married, Michael said. Her name is Rebecca. She's a pediatric surgeon. We have twin girls, Ellie and Grace. They're 5. The world seemed to stop for a moment as Bill absorbed this information. I have granddaughters? He whispered. Michael nodded, pulling out his phone and turning it to show a photo of 2 identical little girls with Martha's eyes and Michael's serious expression. They know all about their Grandpa Bill. We have your picture in their room. Rebecca's been asking to meet you for years, grandchildren. a daughter-in-law, a family he hadn't known existed, hadn't allowed himself to know existed. The loss of those years hit Bill with physical force, but beneath the regret was a spreading warmth, hope, possibility, the chance for connection he'd thought forever closed to him. "I'd like to meet them," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Very much." In that moment, something shifted between father and son. Not a complete healing, not yet, but the beginning of one. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult conversations about the past, practical challenges in the present, uncertainties about the future. But for the first time in 7 years, Bill Peterson felt something like anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. 3 months after the nightmare of parasitic larvae and emergency surgery, Bill Peterson stood at the window of his son's Boston apartment, watching snow fall gently onto the tree-lined street below. December in New England was a far cry from Florida's perpetual warmth, but the cold had its own beauty. Pristine white blankets transforming the urban landscape, holiday lights twinkling through the early darkness. Behind him, the apartment hummed with activity. Rebecca, his daughter-in-law, was baking cookies with the twins, the kitchen filled with laughter and the sweet scent of vanilla. Michael sat at the dining room table, working through patient files, but looking up occasionally to smile at the domestic scene. It was a life Bill had never imagined for himself, one that still sometimes felt borrowed, as if he might wake up alone in his Florida house with nothing but memories for company. The transition hadn't been easy. His recovery had progressed in fits and starts, the deeper extraction sites healing slowly, occasional bouts of fever and fatigue requiring careful monitoring. There had been awkward moments between him and Michael, old hurts surfacing unexpectedly in casual conversations, silences that stretched too long when certain topics arose. Rebecca had acted as unintentional mediator, her warm practicality smoothing rough edges between father and son. The twins had accepted him without reservation, with the uncomplicated affection of children who had been told their grandfather was someone to love. Ellie, the more serious of the two, had solemnly examined his healing wounds during his first week there, declaring that she too would be a doctor someday to fix people like Daddy and Grandpa. Grace, more exuberant, had simply climbed into his lap one evening and fallen asleep against his chest, an act of trust that had brought unexpected tears to Bill's eyes. "Penny for your thoughts," Michael said, suddenly beside him at the window. Bill smiled. "Just thinking about how different things were 3 months ago, how close I came to missing all this." He gestured toward the kitchen where Rebecca was helping the girls decorate star-shaped cookies. "Mom would have loved them," Michael said quietly. "She would have spoiled them rotten," Bill agreed, the mention of Martha no longer bringing the sharp pain it once had. "And she'd have given Rebecca all her secret recipes." "I found her recipe box when we were packing up your house," Michael said. "Rebecca's already planning to try her apple cake for Christmas." The matter-of-fact reference to packing up the Florida house still caused a twinge of uncertainty in Bill's chest. After much discussion, he had decided to sell the property. Too many memories, too many maintenance issues, too far from his newly discovered family. The practical decision made sense, but emotionally it represented the final closure of his life with Martha, an acknowledgement that moving forward meant letting go. "Any word from the realtor?" he asked. Michael nodded. "She called this morning. There's an offer, close to asking price. A young couple with a baby on the way." "That seems fitting," Bill said after a moment. It was a good house for raising a family. The financial aspects had worked out better than Bill could have hoped. Between the house sale, a settlement from the class action lawsuit against Discount Furniture Warehouse for importing parasite-infested mattresses, and Michael's expert navigation of hospital charity programs, Bill's medical debt had been resolved. He wasn't wealthy by any means, but he was stable, his pension and Social Security sufficient for his modest needs, with enough left to occasionally spoil his granddaughters. "Grandpa," Grace called from the kitchen. "Come see our cookies." Bill moved away from the window, his gait still slightly uneven but stronger than it had been in years. Physical therapy, proper nutrition, and the gentle insistence of a family that cared about his well-being had reversed much of the decline he'd allowed during his years of isolation. In the kitchen, Grace proudly displayed a lopsided star covered in an improbable amount of green sprinkles. "It's for you," she declared, "because Daddy says green is your favorite color." Bill glanced at Michael, surprised that his son remembered such a small detail from decades ago. "It is indeed," he confirmed, accepting the cookie with appropriate reverence. "This might be the most beautiful cookie I've ever seen." "Mine's prettier," Ellie insisted, holding up her own creation, meticulously decorated with alternating red and white sprinkles. "They're both masterpieces," Rebecca intervened diplomatically. "Why don't you make one for Nurse Margaret? She's coming for dinner tomorrow, remember?" The mention of Margaret brought a smile to Bill's face. She had been a crucial part of his recovery, first in Florida and then, surprisingly, in Boston. Upon learning of Bill's relocation, she had revealed that her sister lived in Cambridge, just across the river. Her regular visits had provided continuity during the transition, a living connection to Martha and to his former life. "I think Margaret would love a cookie from each of you," Bill suggested. "She has a special place in her heart for both my granddaughters." As the girls debated what colors Margaret would prefer, Bill's phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Eleanor, who had appointed herself caretaker of his mail and remaining affairs in Florida. She sent weekly updates, usually accompanied by complaints about the weather, her arthritis, or the new neighbors who had moved into the cul-de-sac. Today's message included a photo of the community bulletin board at Palm Haven. "Your band misses you. Director says trombone section hasn't been the same. When are you visiting, Eleanor?" The message brought a pang of nostalgia. Despite his self-imposed isolation, there were aspects of his Florida life he missed. The community band rehearsals, the familiar rhythm of his neighborhood, the warmth of January days when Boston was buried in snow. But those things would be there to visit. His family was here. "Dad?" Michael's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Everything okay?" "Just Eleanor," Bill explained, showing him the message. "Apparently I'm irreplaceable in the trombone section." "You should visit after the holidays," Rebecca suggested, overhearing as she wiped flour from the countertop. "We could all go. The girls have never been to Florida, and I'd love to see where Michael grew up." "We didn't move there until after I left for college," Michael reminded her. "Still, it was your parents' home," Rebecca insisted. "Part of your history, and I want to meet this famous Eleanor who calls at the most inappropriate times." The easy way Rebecca included him in family plans still surprised Bill sometimes. The assumption that he belonged with them, that his presence was wanted rather than tolerated. It was a healing he hadn't known he needed. "A visit might be nice," he agreed, "but what about your work schedule?" "I'm due some vacation time," Michael said, "and there's a medical conference in Tampa in February I was considering anyway. We could combine the trips." As they discussed potential dates, Bill felt a now familiar wave of gratitude wash over him. 3 months ago, he had been dying alone in his house, too stubborn to seek help, too isolated to be missed. Now he was planning family vacations, baking cookies with granddaughters, rebuilding a relationship with his son that he had thought irrevocably broken. Martha had been right, as she so often was. In her final letters, she had urged him to live fully, to reconnect with Michael, to open himself to new possibilities. It had taken a medical crisis of bizarre proportions to break through his self-imposed isolation, but the result was a second chance he hadn't dared to imagine. That evening, after the twins were tucked into bed with stories and goodnight kisses, Bill sat with Michael and Rebecca in the living room, a fire crackling in the gas fireplace, Christmas lights reflecting softly against the windows. "I've been thinking," Bill said, setting down his tea, "about what comes next." Michael looked up from his book, expression carefully neutral. "What do you mean?" "I can't stay in your guest room forever," Bill explained. "You and Rebecca need your space, and I need—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I need to build my own life here. If Boston is going to be my home now, I should have a place of my own." "Dad, there's no rush," Michael began, but Rebecca laid a gentle hand on his arm. "Your father's right," she said. "As much as we love having him here, he needs his independence." She turned to Bill with a warm smile. "You've been looking at apartments?" Bill nodded, relieved at her understanding. "Nothing firm yet, but there's a senior living community about 15 minutes from here, independent apartments, but with some communal spaces and activities. They have a vacancy coming up next month." "The Willows?" Rebecca asked. "On Maple Street? One of my colleagues' father lives there. She says it's excellent." "That's the one," Bill confirmed. "I visited last week while you were at work. It's not too institutional, not too isolated. And they have a residence music group that could use a trombone player." Michael was quiet for a moment, processing. "Is this really what you want, Dad?" "You're welcome here as long as you need." "It's what I need," Bill replied gently. "To honor your mother's wishes that I truly live, not just exist. To give you and Rebecca the space to be a family without your aging father underfoot. And to challenge myself to build new connections, new routines." After a moment, Michael nodded. "Okay, but promise you'll come for Sunday dinners and holidays, and whenever the girls have school performances. And I think what your husband is trying to say," Rebecca interrupted with a laugh, "is that moving into your own place doesn't mean you're not still very much a part of this family." Later that night, alone in the guest room that had been his sanctuary these past months, Bill sat at the small desk by the window and opened Martha's journal. He had read and reread her letters countless times since discovering them, finding new insights, new guidance with each reading. Tonight, he turned to her final entry, the one written just days before her death. "And Bill, promise me you'll live, really live, not just exist." He picked up a pen and began writing beneath her words, a response 7 years overdue. "Martha, I'm finally keeping my promise. Not in the way either of us would have chosen, but perhaps in the way we both needed. Our son is an extraordinary man, a healer, a father, the best parts of both of us combined. He has given me a second chance I don't deserve, but am grateful for every day. You were right about so many things, about needing to let go when it was time, about Michael and me being too similar for our own good, about the dangers of isolation. I miss you every day. I think I always will. But I'm learning that missing you doesn't mean I can't also embrace what life still offers. The joy of watching our granddaughters grow, the satisfaction of making music again, the comfort of friendships, both old and new. Thank you for your wisdom, your patience, and your love. Thank you for Margaret, who kept her promise to you when I couldn't keep mine. Thank you for the family that carries your spirit forward. I am living now, my love, really living, forever yours, Bill." He closed the journal and placed it on the bedside table. Outside, snow continued to fall, transforming the world into something new and clean. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: physical therapy appointments, discussions about the house sale, the ongoing adjustment to a life so different from what he had imagined. But for the first time in 7 years, William Peterson looked forward to tomorrow with anticipation rather than dread. The parasites that had nearly killed him had, ironically, forced him back into life, breaking through the hardened shell of grief and isolation to reveal the possibility of joy that had been waiting all along. As he turned out the light, Bill thought he could almost hear Martha's voice, as clear as if she were beside him. "About time, my love. About time." What begins as our deepest pain can become our greatest blessing in disguise. When Bill Peterson discovered parasites beneath his skin, he was a man drowning in grief, isolated from his only son and merely existing in the shadow of his beloved Martha's death. His medical crisis became the bridge back to life itself, revealing a son who never stopped caring, grandchildren he never knew existed, and a community quietly watching over him. Many of us, like Bill, build walls of independence that become our prisons. We reject help out of pride, missing the connections that make life worth living. Martha's final wish for her husband wasn't for him to remain loyal to her memory through isolation, but to really live, not just exist. Sometimes it takes a crisis to realize that opening ourselves to vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage. It's never too late to rebuild what's broken, to discover joy in unexpected places, or to honor those we've lost by embracing the life they would want for us. What relationships have you let slip away that might be worth rekindling? How might your independence actually be holding you back from the connections you need? Share your story in the comments. We're all walking this journey together.